So I'm Greg, by the way. Yeah.
I'm Carol. Yeah, I feel that if, as far as safety goes, there needs to be something within the community, not something on the CFA website or anything else. The community, there should be someone who contacts people within the community. There should be some meeting point, at whether it's the Oval down there or wherever it is, and people should be
put in the picture as to what.
Yeah, as what's going on. And if you know your neighbours or whoever they are, you can contact, there could be a person who contacts the neighbours within their street. We were in a court back there, we knew everybody. But there was no one controlling anything. It was just the most chaotic thing you could ever go through. And the same thing could happen here, because this is probably worse than Smythesdale in that regard, as the forests and everything go. The fire threat here would be terrible. But you've got to know about the fire before you can escape. And that's the worst part of it, if you don't know. Until you hear the wall of flame coming up the road. And that's how close we were.
If there was one single person, like CFA or whatever it is, that was actually controlling what was happening in the town to make everybody a little bit safer, like people up our road, up Webster Street, they're right at the edge of the bush. Like
we've got 3 people in our street in wheelchairs and that. And if they didn't know, there's no way in the world they're going to get out of the street. There's old people, there's eccentric people that never come out of their houses or anything. They'd just be burnt to death. Point, if you don't have social media, how do you know? No one comes knocking on your door in a fire like the CFA and says, there's a fire, 5k up the road, 10k up the road, get out. It just doesn't happen. That's the real world when there's a fire. It's horrible until you've lived through it. They were worried about the fire front, but they weren't worried about the people that were behind the fire front and whether they were still in their houses. And us as a community, in our court and up the end of the road, some of us stayed, some of us left. But they could have contacted us, but no one contacted us to tell us where the fire even was. And it was past Hillcrest, coming towards Smythesdale.
But there's still too many agencies involved in it all for us to really know. And in a little community like this, it'd be great to have like even a small network, but for one person to know what was really going on, real time, and to be able to disseminate that information out to all the other people. How safe is the community? Look, Carol and I feel safe because we've been through a lot of this and we're easily transported. We can just jump in the car and go, which eventually that's what we did in Smythesdale. We left because
too late, all the
we didn't really know. And then there's police telling you you're too late and abusing you for going out late.
Go back into the fire because you can't go, you can't get out. So then you're trapped. It's the worst thing in the world. We left too late.
We did leave too late, but then you can't get back in either.
You could have in Linton like a north, south, east and west coordinator of certain areas and one coordinator or something like that, but it's just communication. You just need communication from people that are left behind, because there'll be people left behind.
But it's interesting to know when you say what may mitigate this happening again, but where the fires went through in Smythesdale, it was only a matter of a year. All the undergrowth had just grown back even more rapidly than it was before and more dense. So it's only a matter of time, if ever there were, but probably it's a 100-year job. And everything's grown back, there's more undergrowth. I just don't think backburning is the answer to all the problems these days. I'm sure there would be a lot of complacency in people.
You probably don't have that fear.
Probably back then we were a little bit like that. And I used to say to Carol, we don't need to worry because there's so many people and so many homes around us. Surely if it comes this far, it's going to burn out a lot of other people, a lot of other houses, so there's got to be, somebody will let us know. But it didn't bloody happen. And I'm talking like, maybe 300-400 metres as a crow flies. This almighty roar that you can't believe. You've got to hear it.
I think that thing about packing your suitcase and packing the essentials, what you really do want, and your animals and whatever, is really a real thing, because you don't have the time to do it.
No, and it's more
we left with our animals, and that's all we left with. But I didn't really care about anything else at that stage. But
you've never seen anything like it. The intensity and heat of a fire. You just can't believe what happens when there's a fire coming. People think, it's a few K away, but a few K away is way too late.
Hello, I'm David and I've lived in Linton for 5 years.
You said that you'd source information from sort of television and the Vic Emergency app in regards to fire, floods and pandemics. So that's your source of, go-to of information.
We were in a lockdown until this Tuesday, and then we were no longer in the lockdown, but Melbourne still is. So all the concentration is on the cases in Melbourne and Ring of Steel and all that. But I personally am not quite sure what the restrictions are now on us in the regional areas. It might be good if some sort of local announcement could be made.
My name's Rosemary and I've lived in Linton for 20 years. I came here from Melbourne.
Is there any way the community or say the CFA or even emergency services could help the community further to that other than the publication?
I'm sure there are ways and I don't quite know what they are. I like to think that somebody might just ring me on the phone and see that I'm all right. I'd also contact the police if I was frightened. I've used the police before when I've had animal emergencies. So I think the networking thing is probably something that's important. At the risk, I've got blue gums and they have lots of bark that drops, and those sorts of things can be a problem for older women on their own, and I'm not sure what the answer is to that. I try and do the burn-offs when I can, just with a bonfire, but it's always an issue about whether you've done enough or.
My name is Brian Mullins. I live in Gascoigne's Lane and I've owned my property for 27 years. But I've only been living here full time for about 17 of those years. I lived in Melbourne prior to that. My place is surrounded by forest and trees on what you would call the nature strip, which is the outside of my perimeter fence. And so that's a major concern for me. And it's the number of pine trees that no one seems to bother with, but they're rampant, they're out of control, they're just growing crazily. And that is a real concern, because if there was a fire in the area, it would just blaze through there. And if you recall back to that dreadful fire that we had years ago, they stopped it in the property next door to mine, which is a bit close for comfort. So yes, I would like to see the council or somebody held responsible for that growth of feral trees along the roadsides. Gascoigne's Lane, drive down there and you will see in a flash what I'm talking about.
So in actual fact, you're saying that you don't feel safe where you live in because of what's surrounding you at the moment, and it could be improved.
Well, as far as the safety is concerned, my property is the most vulnerable. I could either get out or, as I said previously, jump in the dam. But I have noticed that during the seasons following that terrible fire, I forget the year that it was, it's about 9 or 10 years ago, they did concentrate on keeping the tracks in the bush at the back of my place cleared, but I haven't seen or heard of anything being cleared. And I know for a fact there are lots of trees across tracks, which used to be fire access roads. Now I don't know what they would do. Some action regarding absentee landowners. And the people next door, they weren't the owners at that time, but they were absentee landowners, and nothing was done to control the grass, which just grew rampantly. Had it have come through either from the north or the western side, it would have gone across the Gascoigne's Lane into that untouched forest area along the rail trail and straight through the town. There would be no Linton. Maybe we've got to look at getting some Aboriginal people in to help with those so-called cold burns or whatever they are. I don't know a lot about firefighting, but they do. Well, I regard Linton as a tinderbox, just waiting to go. They certainly need to look at it seriously and not just talk, but let's get a bit of action.
Hi, my name's Irene and I live in Linton. I do feel safe in Linton. Surrounding areas are not quite as safe as for the bush that's surrounding us, particularly the bush that's surrounding us, because there's just so much fuel on the ground. It's terrible. And I reckon DELP could do something about that. Like, why can't you show your shire rates and be allowed to get a trailer load of wood?
So how do you think maybe you would communicate to those people that don't use social media? How would you let them know that maybe a bushfire is happening, or that they need to be aware of potential flooding or a storm if they're not on social media?
They assume that everybody's got it and knows how to use it, and I think that's pretty much a mistake. Whether you have 4 or 5 people in the town that have that access and can then ring, or you have a list of people in the community that are vulnerable people and access them that way, I don't know. I don't know. It's a deep question, actually. How do you actually access all that stuff? Do you put something in the shire rates with a list of people and numbers associated with what needs to be done that they can actually put on their fridges or something? I don't know.
Hi, my name's Karen. We live in a location where there's a lot of bush, there's a lot of pine plantations, there's a lot of overgrown areas, and whilst we do some burning off through the year, a lot of that load, if you like, goes to DELP, and I know that they don't do a lot. So in terms of fire safety, I don't think we're in a particularly safe zone. I think we're quite at risk. Floods, that's probably the other one I would think of. I think in exactly where I live, I'm not really concerned about it. I don't think it would be too concerning for many people in Linton, but I do think that the Wodialloc Creek needs some attention. And I think that the state that it's in currently, both on private land and on Crown land, would lead to potentially a pretty awful flood event occurring. We've got a lot of new people in Linton, and they probably don't know a lot about where to go or what to do in those areas, and they might be affected, caught in floodwaters, whatever. I've lived in this town for 10 years, and it's only through hearsay, it's only through word of mouth that I know that it's the rec reserve that you go to if there's an event occurring. But I think we need to do more than that. It's not about word of mouth, because that could be wrong, it could change. And that's just simply not good enough. Word of mouth isn't enough. I think there needs to be some kind of campaign that really clearly states where we go, what to do, what to bring, what not to bring, how long we're likely to be there for, what services are going to be there, what services aren't going to be there. There needs to be a lot more information. We have a lot of different age groups here, a lot of people with disabilities, a lot of people who, different age ranges, demographics, you've got different cultural backgrounds as well. So I think it really needs to be a diverse way we get that information to people. We can't just rely on one source like social media. I think that's great for the young people. I think it's great for perhaps us middle-aged people who use it a bit, but the elderly don't use it. I've got 86-year-old parents, they would not use it, they're not on it, they wouldn't have a clue. I think, a short TV or radio ad might be useful, but for goodness sakes, if you're going to put a website link on it, put something else where they can go and find that information as well, like a phone number, because I know my folks, when they get an ad on telly and it has a look up the website here, they get furious because they can't do that. They don't have a computer, they don't have internet. So I think they need to think about the range of people that will be accessing that information and allow people to source it from a variety. So the Linton News, the Gazette, social media, ads on the radio, ads on the TV. I don't know, I'm not a media guru, that's their job, but it needs to be a variety of sources and regular. I know when we've had to attend fires in pine plantations, it's been absolute chaos. So I think there needs to be some responsibility there that when they clean up or when they take the pines, they need to clean up a bit better. They don't seem to clean up very well, leaving a lot of debris behind, which becomes, a fire load. And I don't know that DELP are really good at being aware of what's going on in any particular area. And that's not a criticism of DELP. That's just, I know they've got a lot of work to do in a lot of different areas. It's, I think, probably comes down to the locals really highlighting those risks, and if need be, we need to keep jumping up and down until those risks are mitigated as best as possible. DELP or anywhere else isn't going to know about the problem, particularly unless someone locally or the council highlights it on a regular basis, puts it on a list for them to get to. For me, I'll go back to the Wodialloc Creek. It needs to be cleaned out, both on private properties and council land or other land. It's a disgrace. It's blocked. It's got gauze in it. It's got hawthorn trees in it, all of which is pretty sad for the flow or for the natural flow of the creek there, and that really, I think, needs to change, and I think that would help as well in terms of allowing the flow of the creek to go naturally and not be blocked up by rubbish and gauze and hawthorn trees and everything else. Because of the way, and I can only speak for the way CFA works, because of the way we set up huge areas where we conduct and control the whole site. I'm sure DELP and the council might do the same thing. But as far as the communication between those organisations, there's very little. And I think there needs to be a lot more. And I think it almost comes down to a competition between those organisations, and it needs to not be a competition. We're all working for the same goal, and we need to be on the same page about what we're trying to achieve. Yeah, I know CFA does a lot. I think they could do more. I think there's a lot more that the CFA could do. Usually you'll find the local firefighters on the ground know the areas really well, have been in the CFA for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. They've seen changes, they've seen things go down. They've got a much better idea about the needs of the community. Our communities speak volumes for who we are, the kind of people we are, who we see ourselves as, the way we live our lives, what's important to us. They really are a reflection of who we are as individuals. And when that comes under threat, whether it be from fire, floods, pandemics, whatever it is, when that comes under threat, we feel extremely vulnerable, and it's almost as though we can lose our sense of identity.
Bev Harris. As soon as summer starts to rock around, I get suitcases and I get tubs and I fill them with things that I know I could never replace and store them because I'm that paranoid about a fire coming through. The concern is the bush on the northern aspect of where I live. If we get a bad day and a hot northerly wind and it comes through there, we're gone. Oh, it would come straight down from the north and take Linton out. No doubt about that. I think what they really need to do is give our bush back to the Indigenous people of the areas. We need to collaborate with the Indigenous people. They know how to look after the bush. That bush has been so neglected, it is a disgrace. And I think now, unfortunately, it's been so neglected for so long, I think the people like DELP just wash their hands of it because they A, don't know where to start, B, don't have the resources. That's my opinion, and I think that's where the problem is. It's been let go too long, and now it's like, how do we fix it? It's going to cost a lot of money. Well, it's going to cost lives if they don't. So many trees up there that shouldn't even be there. The pines are just feral. They're just absolutely feral, and they're coming up in their hundreds and in their thousands. They're taking over the native bush, but no one wants to get in there and do anything about it. If that has any impact on the bush, because you've got pine forests, timber pines, used for timber, set right up against native bush. Now, it has to have some impact, I think. Obviously, it's a usable product, so why can't they get people in there to take the pines out of our native forests and use them for whether they're chipped for, you know, paper or whatever they do with them, or they're used for timber in housing.
Hunter, and I'm 12. Yes, 100%. We are surrounded by bush, but I know the safest way. We could go down to the rally point, which is the cricket oval, and then contact 000 for escort helicopters.
I'm Kirk. Single biggest reduction of fuel in state forests is firewood collection, which mostly we're not able to do. If we could open up firewood collection, it'd cause the end to a lot of the headaches of people that especially live in it or on the edge of it. The bigger issue is pines choking out gums and killing them, increasing the amount of dead standing trees in a collective of timber. That's the bigger issue. And they're typically more the self-seeding ones rather than plantation pines. It's a commodity. Firewood's a commodity. 90% of the houses in this shire and area use wood stoves, wood heaters for their main source of heating. It's just a horrific waste for people to just set fire to it for the sake of reducing fuel.
My name's Jordan McDonald. I'm 17 and I've lived in Linton my whole life.
Do you think we're sort of at risk in terms of the bushfire?
You know, it'd be really easy for things to catch on fire. You just don't know when it's going to come.
My name's Linda and I live in Linton, and I've lived in Linton for 10 years. Other than the fact I've always been afraid of the fires because, you know, what happened when all the firefighters died, it always makes you aware of what the potential could be here. I'm also aware that I'm a vulnerable person because I'm visually impaired with a guide dog. And I often think, you know, how will I know? How will I know when to get out? You know, in my situation now, I wouldn't like to move because I'm very familiar with my area. I can walk the dog, I know where I'm going. I've got a wonderful community around me now, but I have this incredible fear of a fire coming through here and not knowing how I would get out. So that is my main fear of Linton. I once went to a CFA information night down at the CFA shed, and I said, what happens? I said, I'm with a vulnerable person. I said, I am actually on the vulnerable persons list. I said, do the firemen come and get me out? No. Do the police? No. I said, well, who is responsible for the vulnerable people here in Linton? And I was told, oh, it's the responsibility of the Shire. Well, we haven't got a Shire office here anymore. And even if we still had the Shire office here, they didn't work at weekends. There were only a couple of women working there. You know, they don't work there at night. The actual main Shire is in Bannockburn, which is, I don't know how many, 80 miles away or something. So that worried me. I mean, I do worry about the pandemic, but, you know, I think if everybody gets vaccinated and they do the right thing and they don't, you know, disobey the rules, they're there for our safety, I think we can get through this. Obviously, I think everybody is concerned about the pandemic. I think it's going to be something with us for a hell of a long time. And I think as far as information goes, they have to realise that not everybody is on social media, not everybody has got a computer, and not everybody can read or see pamphlets. They need to have somebody looking out for the vulnerable people in these small communities. It's not just Linton, it's any small community where there's some sort of emergency or crisis.
Today we had a workshop, Safer Together, Stronger Together. It's about connecting community with leaders. peak bodies such as CFA, Council, Emergency Services, DELP, to name a few of the people that attended this workshop. I was very humbled to see that these people came to this workshop today and were able to contribute some really important information about teaching us to be safe in our community. But in turn also that they understood that we have risks and we would like to mitigate those risks in our community. So bringing us together in this way will achieve great things moving forward as we try to mitigate lots of things. It's about learning, education, it's about making sure that they understand what we see as a risk that they might not have identified. So this sort of partnership is such an important aspect to connecting communities, leaders, and protecting our small community, Linton.
The key takeaway for me is that the community is interested. They're interested in their risks within the community themselves and they want to do something about it. Where do we go to from here? It's about putting the things that we spoke about today into practice, ensuring that there's that stakeholder buy-in, but also the relationship building through the process. So there's a bit of work to be done, but I think it can be achieved. So the fact is that the community is interested in making sure that their community is mitigated against the risk of bushfire and other hazards, and we're here to support them.
I think the key takeaway for me from the workshop today is I think we need to create a local register of those people that need the community support and those vulnerable people, for want of a better word, that need assistance, so that we can look after those people in such times as a crisis, as like a bushfire or an incident like that. What I'd like to do is sit down with yourself and the key stakeholders and create that register so that we can get that list together. But I think we need to, as a community, band together and look after one another in the case of a bushfire, so that we can all be stronger as one. So I think, moving forward, I think we need to look at that and look at creating the community group as a whole.
My key takeaway would be the passion of some local community members that have got together to try and help spread their knowledge and concern of the risks for the broader community in the Linton area. I think the really important thing from here is to be promoting the conversations within the different households and community members that are local to here, to spread that knowledge of the risk and see what the simple things are that people can do for themselves in their patch of land, and also to help out and work with their neighbours so that they can help plan and prepare for emergencies in this township.
So my takeaway was the video was so seems that the community is empowered and wants to work on community safety and fire safety in the Linton area. I took out that we, coming from a council perspective and working in emergency management, we see things differently to what the community think, and it's good to see what the community are saying, and now we can work on strategies to address their concerns. I think what we need to do is facilitate a specialised group in the community to come together, and we work through these problems. So this can be, a long-term idea, but with the community having monthly meetings and then inviting agencies on separate meetings to attend, council, CFA, DELP, those sort of things, and then coming up with some solutions. We might not have the results that everyone wants, but if we can start with what to do around your own property, and then we build out, that would be for the best thing for the Linton community.
I think the key takeaway was, firstly, you've got a group working together and passionate and excited about their town, along with agencies who can see the challenges that you're facing. So I think the key takeaway is how this moves forward, and that people can come together and talk across different disciplines and different ideas. I think there's a lot of pathways that could be taken or should be taken, and I think they're probably going to have to happen at the same time. So I think the community talking amongst themselves is a key point, but also engaging with the agencies to identify where the perceived risk is and whether that matches with the agency's opinion and what treatments could actually be put in place to reduce those. But I think there's a longer term vision of continuing that conversation with community agencies to ensure that 20, 30 years from now we're in a very different position for Linton. Well, for me personally, working in a research agency, we're constantly evolving our knowledge and developing it. But I think it's important that as researchers that we're involved in processes such as this, but also working through many different outlets and not just sticking to scientific conferences. So working with the media at all different levels, but getting engaged with our local communities to pass on this knowledge and understanding.
I think the key takeaway was just the way that community and all the government departments and council were able to sit together and collaborate on such a wonderful initiative of looking at making people safe with bushfire initiatives and recovery. So I think it's a really good outcome for the day. Well, I think there's a number of different areas that I think we can explore. There's opportunities with DELP and Council looking at the logistics of the legal aspects of supporting Linton for the bushfire recovery program, as well as the community. There's a lot of opportunities to run events and educate the local community and just to bring them together to support each other and also help identify areas where Council and DELP can also provide support, and also with the CFA and the police. So it's a really great opportunity to have a lot of these initiatives come together in one place and provide for a lot safer community.